Hey folks, I've been thinking about doing this video for a while, and I've been thinking about how I would try to do this, and now I have some time. I figured I'd just jump right into it, like I always do. So this is going to be about roll cages, how I did mine, and how the chassis in a Mopar leaf spring car works, especially in like the super stock drag racing aspect. So I'm laying on the floor right now, and I figured I'd start right from the front and run you through the roll cage. Okay, so it's kind of dark in here. You can see where I started down here on purpose so you guys could get easily oriented to where I was going to take you here. So there's a sway bar. There's a brake caliper. That right there is how I boxed in the tubular roll cage, front roll cage tube to the front subframe. We figured out that would be the best way to do it. It's held for all this time. That's how I did it. I brought the tube in there. I think I welded the tube to the frame maybe, and it was plated on all the sides, and there it is. And then it goes up. Obviously, if I can find any pictures of my roll cage with the front wheel off, I was going to take the wheel off and show you that, but I'm lazy. So that roll cage front tube punches through the firewall back there, right? The inner fender, front wheelhouse, whatever you want to call it. Not inner fender, but that goes into the passenger compartment. Now that's welded back there with like a reinforcement plate, and the tube itself is welded to the firewall. And then up there, you can see some weld. That's a plate that shoots up to the bottom side of the shock tower, where that's all reinforced there. It's hard to see, but so I tried to tie into all the strong parts of the car. So I'm going to stand up here and take some pressure off my neck. Oh, there we go. And I'm going to explain to you how I didn't want the roll cage tubes in here because I don't have enough room as it is. And I didn't want to like tube chassis all this and such. I wanted to keep the car as stock as possible. So it punches through in here. And like I said, it's welded around the firewall. Make sure I hit my lawnmower at the door. We're going to come to this design in a second. And people have commented on that and not agreed with me and whatever, but I don't care. I'll explain to you why it's like that. If you can see under there, and excuse the wiring, it has to be cleaned up. I've been working. There's the bottom of the welded reinforcement plate where that punches through the firewall. It's done in 2 sections. So obviously you don't have to thread it through the reinforcement plate. So as I can remind you guys, this car is super aero straight as it goes down and launches the drag strip. So I think this is a Chris Dawson's Chassis Works or a Competition Engineering roll cage. I can't remember which one. But this is my own design. Let me back you out a half zoom there. I designed this way purposefully for multiple reasons. I didn't know or want to have to come into the dash and cut down through here. I didn't think I could do a good enough job doing that. And I didn't want to damage the car. I didn't want to hurt the car. This is the first roll cage I've ever done. Me and my father did this. Took a long time too. And I welded all this with the inside of the car in. The seats were out, obviously the carpet's out, the console was out. But all the rest of the car, it was all covered with fireproof blankets and shit, so I didn't have to take the headliner or anything out. So I did this. This pipe is actually for that side, and obviously the inverse, and they're upside down. So I figured instead of going forward and down and having to damage the dash area, I could just scoot in and under and then reinforce everything. But with this setup, you can see over there, originally I didn't have clevises in this. This was later. I have to paint this side too still. It's obviously it's rusting and shit. That side I painted already, but I designed it so you could still use everything I didn't have to take off the armrests and the window levers, all that shit. It's all can be used. It's all NHRA legal and where the crossbars and stuff go. But so I designed this Batwing design thing here because I like gusseting stuff. It makes shit so much stronger. But how I needed to come in and bond to the front supports, I thought about the whole chassis of the car and how when you launch the car, all the power is coming out, all the weight's in the front, and the front end's just hanging out there, dangling off the back half, all that weight, the whole engine and all that shit. That's why you see like door, the gaps get bent and shit like that. And when you put a car in a hoist and you see it sag. So I had to sit here and think in my mind how this came in and all this weight's going to be hanging off this. So I designed this setup here, this like kicker into the floor, because all that weight was going to just pull down and it would be all stabilized through this whole section. And obviously the dash bar goes across and binds it all together. But I don't really like clevicing a roll cage because it takes away the strength no matter what. You can't do anything about it, but you basically have to have them if you're going to use the car for anything other than just drag racing. Because only I could get in and out of this thing. And I'd have to go under the bar and get in there. It was a pain in the ass. So I cleviced it later. But if you stand back and look at that design and think of all the weight of the front end of the car being suspended by the horsepower in the chassis and lifted off the ground, it's going to want to just bend right there. Now you like that sound effect, right? So all those gussets won't allow that buckling. That's why I did this Batwing. I just put curves in it to make it look, a little bit more stylish. Plus I didn't want this big blocky looking thing. That'd be stupid. So that's why I did that. And I think it's a pretty effective design. I mean, it does interfere with your leg room and how you get in and out of the car. It's definitely not the most ergonomic roll cage. I mean, you just get into it, you just turn your foot like this, step in this way, and when you step out, you take your toe out first and then heel out first. If you do it that way every time, you don't get jammed up. It's kind of like a frog. So when you think of, close the door and I'm going to step back here. So you think of the whole car at once. I want to do this where I could get back a ways, but I would have to do it outside. And so now you can think of the car launching. Now a Mopar, the whole car, the whole body lifts up, right? Because it's being driven by the back wheels and it's being shoved up. I'm going to keep doing these motions like this. So if you don't understand how these leaf spring super stock suspensions work, you'll get a visual idea. So this is going to be, the wheel's going to spin forward, drive that front leaf spring up into the body. And we're going to get to that dynamic in a second. And it's lifting the whole guy up, but that's where you get this front end wanting to hang. And that's where that is being supported into the chassis that way, right? So we're only going to work on probably one dimension of the launch. I'm not really going to talk about how the rear end wants to do different things in this axis. We're just going to talk about the body moving in this axis right now anyway. So car takes off, whole body lifts up, car goes. Front wheels might be dangling. Now you get a huge space in between the tire and the rear body. And if you watch old drag racing footage of Mopars, you'll see. So this will rise right up. Now I got an electrical tape arrow there and an electrical tape arrow back there. Those represent the body twisting force that happens back here if you don't have a roll cage. I mean, it's still happening when you have a roll cage, but if you don't have a roll cage, this is exceptionally powerful, especially if you have a powerful engine that's solid mounted, no subframe connectors, or you get subframe connectors and you don't have roll cage to strengthen the back half of the car. This is what happens if you don't have Hemi torque boxes and stuff. Your leaf spring perch drives up. Now that's lifting the whole body up and forward. The rear spring shackle pulls the body down. The roof is trying to support the downward pull of the back of the trunk. So what'll happen on a car if you don't have a roll cage and you don't stiffen the body, it'll literally pull the trunk down so hard because the tire is wanting to run under the car and shove the rest up, that it pushes this section of the car, which is the weakest in the back, out, and it wants to fold the ass end right down and crease this out on both sides. That's why my car had a crack right here in the clear coat from drag racing without a roll cage and having slicks and subframe connectors and a solid mounted engine. And once I got super stocks, it made the whole situation worse. It was transferring all the power into the body. So, I mean, that's all been corrected cosmetically now, but so you get into the back half of the roll cage. So it's going to be a little harder to see. Let me put the seat forward. So there's my clevis sections here, but is that some roll cage padding too? I don't know where that goes. I gotta sort that out. But so you see this back side. The other side is mirrored. So I would have liked to do an X brace in the back. Well, before I fall out of the car. But it was too complicated to make good. So we ended up with this design. So you got these kickers that came stock with the cage design, actually. And you remember me looking underneath in a video where I had made that like 3x2 box tubing piece that goes up in the body in front of the, or up in the floor pan in front of the rear mufflers. Obviously the rear mufflers are all back there. It goes right under the front of the seat, kind of up to the hump and then down the other side. And then these guys spread out the load. And then the Hemi torque box and the front perch is all spread out there and is attached to the subframe connector that shoots up through. So that made this section of the car super strong. So all that thrusting up on the front spring perches could be handled by this section of the cage. All that force driving up through the pipes is spread out across the body of the car. Now you're making the cage and the body becoming one unit to control the power of the car. So now we have these guys that shoot down through the crack in the seat. Now they hit, let's see, right in about here, right? So that's more angle. It's just like a roof. When you're trussing a roof, you got this kicker here trying to hold the body from this torque, the rear suspension forcing up into the body. That's being transmitted right into that kicker to the roll cage, right? And then you got this section here that's driving that force straight up in the roll cage. Now you got the big pipes that come down all the way into the trunk that try to control the pulling down of the rear to strengthen that, to keep the sides from buckling out. Now you'll see those back in there, right? Some guys bring those back farther. I don't really find a need to do that. I mean, I haven't found a need to do that. Maybe if you're making over 1,000 horsepower or something even more, you might. Sorry for tipping the camera. I forgot I was filming. But the problem I saw with that was it was almost becoming so flat, a pipe that would come all the way back here, that I don't know. It wasn't a good. I mean, maybe you could take this guy and shoot it, instead of having that bend in it, to shoot that straight down and through all the way back. But once you start making that piece flatter, it starts losing its strength this way, you know? The more increase you put it on here, it's pulling stronger. It would be weaker, you know what I'm saying? You know, it's kind of taking away the kicker element if you had made it super long, and it would be kind of flexible, I think. So those are the dynamics you have to think of happening in the car when it launches. Remember, back gets pulled down, this gets shoved up. This tire is wanting to be lifted up off the ground, actually, even though there's competing forces. It's being driven down, but it still wants to go up. That's why this leaf spring is a lot stronger. We'll step around to the back to describe that. Now we're working into the second dimension, or whatever you want to call it. So now, if you think of it, the body wants to go like, so this way? Yeah, it wants to go like this, right? It wants to fold this way. And that tire wants to go up. It wants to compress everything on this side because it's the opposite of the engine torque, right? The rear end goes like this. The engine goes like that. The engine and body are connected. And the rear end goes, ugh, but that leaf spring keeps it down, right? So that's why prior to me redoing the trunk, across here, I had it's actually right over here in my pile of stuff. That guy actually has the mount for my electric fuel pump was on that too, but that went across under here to hook the two subframe arms connected or together, so that the subframes wouldn't want to have this thing going on. But I had to sacrifice that in order to run correct exhaust and make the car look good, look better. I wanted this exhaust stock style, so I had to move a bunch of shit. I had to move my on-off switch over here because that was originally on this side. But so when you do all this work, you're obviously adding a bunch of weight to the car. But honestly, all the weight is mainly from here back, which is good. You know what I mean? It's pushing, like if you think about the altered wheelbase Dodge cars, they push the rear end forward and they push the front wheels forward. So they're putting more weight behind the front end, or behind this front axle. The more weight you have behind the front axle, the more traction you have, right? So, and sometimes weight in a drag car doesn't really affect you. It gives you better traction, better body support, and you go faster, even though the car's heavier. And that's kind of what we see in this here. But I mean, I've also done a lot of weight redistribution in the car. As you see, the batteries in the trunk, right? On this side, you want to put them on this side all the time. The heater system and the air conditioning's gone. The hood is now fiberglass. We got aluminum and aluminum and aluminum and aluminum. And aluminum radiators are actually, you can save quite a few pounds changing the radiator to aluminum. Headers, honestly, headers don't really save you that much weight if they're good. If they're good big headers, they're pretty heavy. But then I put manual steering in this car. All that weight change is huge. It's totally huge. You can feel it quickly when you when I noticed on the street back in the day when I was in high school, I had a mild 440, made like 430 horse, probably 425, maybe not even, maybe 400, whatever. It had a lot of torque, and I just had little street tires, and not even these big Nitos. They were just little, I don't know, off brands, and I think they were Lee Radials actually. That's I think was the name of them. But when I put my original battery in the trunk, it was in a cheap Summit plastic box at the time. Just putting that weight in the back made a fairly decent difference in how the car hooked up on the street. I mean, you couldn't hook it up if you smashed it, but you could play with it a little better. You could feel that you had some more torque or some more traction. So putting that battery back there is always a huge plus. But also, the rest of the suspension, other than hold on, where am I going here? You got the roll cage that's just strictly chassis and strengthening the car, along with solid mounts, subframe connectors. All that shit makes a huge difference in how much torque makes it to the rear tires, your rear leaf springs, because you're planning it, you're keeping it planted. Now, when you go with shocks on this, I use QA1s. Super Stockers, maybe something like that. I had the sticker somewhere. I mean, you could probably see it under there, and I was under it. Actually, I can't remember. On the street, I keep them, I'm not sure. I keep them a little stiffer because the car drives better. At the drag strip, I don't think I even run them like full full up react, you know what I mean, like loose coming up, you can tune them pretty well, because you don't want the car to just lurch up super hard. You want it to come up, but you want to control it, right? In the back, I just run, obviously, the super stock B-body springs with extra long drag shocks, so the body can rise as much as possible. So if you're running a Mopar at the drag strip with leaf spring suspension, what do I want to say? I highly recommend you get the Mopar chassis manual, which I have over here on the shelf, but read it, use it, and watch some old footage of the, you know, Dick Landy cars and other super stock car, early leaf spring cars, and see what's happening. And you'll see exactly what I talk about in this pretty long video now, of how the body reacts, how the body goes. If you had just a stock Mopar, big block, decent rear end gears, whatever, but a fairly stock Mopar that was obviously in good tune and running right, you can make a huge advantage at the drag. You can, if you just do suspension work and chassis work, that's like one of the first things I would do if I was going to go super stock racing. Like, if I had a stock car and I wanted to drag race it and to see how well it worked, do the chassis, then do exhaust. You know what I mean? I could go through the Mopar Performance book and they tell you what to do. This is obviously like old school knowledge, but it's all been laid out. I don't know how many people these days are running into old Mopars and running them at the drag strip in fairly stock form, but you can get quite a bit of time out of just the chassis, right? And just incrementally make improvements before you even touch the engine, you know? Let me get to one drawback, okay? I run these Moroso 10 what are they? I don't know the numbers. 7, 10, 15s. I like the way they look on the car because it gives it that Dick Landy super stock Charger look. The one drawback with that roll cage up here, I forgot to mention earlier when I was down there looking at it, is if you have a wider tire, it interferes with how far you can turn. These guys clear it, but if you have a wider tire, it'll rub on the roll cage tube. So I'm kind of locked into using these skinny guys. Of course, it's a street car, drag car replica, you know. I mean, it used to be a real thing. It's, you know, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing car, let's call it, you know. That's, you know, that's the price you got to pay to be able to run a roll cage tube through your wheel well. Now, for all the people who hating on me for doing that roll cage that way, I understand it's not the way it's designed, but I also understand I can get in and out somewhat hampered. It didn't damage anything in my car. It doesn't look 100% awesome. I didn't have a TIG welder or somebody to do it in a shop. I had to do it myself up here in the middle of nowhere with no help other than my dad. And it works wonderfully. So if you don't like my design and say, well, that looks like shit, it's ugly, that Batwing thing you have in here is stupid, I tell you what, the car is arrow straight. Arrow. It ran 11:01 with me letting off on the first line and the end of the timing light. It probably run a 1090, 1085. Perfectly straight. There was no weirdness, no body twist. It just boom, perfect. So that design clearly worked. Although it's maybe a little Addams Family-ish, I guess. Is a good design, good term for it. But anyway, hope some of you might get a kick out of that and learn something. I know that a lot of the shit I talk about is shit from like 1975 tech, maybe, or 1970, but it'll work for you. Check out these stickers too while I'm here doing this. I got these stickers from Norm Kraus himself. And he told me where to put them on the car at the Mopar Nationals. The guy was he was a pretty cool guy. I'm sure he's passed away by now. But anyway, take it easy. Fix your Dodge.